Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Brian Wissinger. Joined Theraco's GlideFast team last August. I've basically been working in the IT business management space for 5 to 6 years. So I come into this via a finance view, not the typical ITSM view that a lot of people that were exposed to ServiceNow and kind of grew on. So I look at this, through a lens of more of a financial kind of data aggregation view than most people do. That being said, PPS is quite a big application. It has lots of modules nested inside of it, and it isn't necessarily one of your core kind of IT applications anymore. It originally was set up to do that, basically to manage IT projects with the IT core platform in the background of ServiceNow serving as kind of its bread and butter. But over the years and over the upgrades, they've realized that a lot more companies are trying to use PPS in a non-IT manner. So they are, every upgrade, every release, there's more and more things that are coming out. So what I wanted to do today was just kind of take you guys through kind of the high level overview of some of the important modules inside of PPS. I'll give you a few screenshots and kind of walk you through going from idea to a project and populating some of the cost modules. And also give you kind of some viewpoints that I have from a development standpoint of where a lot of customers seem to do a lot of configuration and customization of the process. And potential roadblocks that you may have in implementation. So here on the second slide, I just want to give you a quick, ServiceNow definition of what they say PPS is. I'm not going to read the whole thing to you, but they basically give it very IT speak. You can see that they certainly call out project portfolio and IT development by combining several individual applications. So again, this goes down to my definition. It is a system developed from IT people for IT people. It is really hard for non-IT people to grasp how this is set up, and they want to customize it very to their specifications. But you realize that a lot of the stuff built in the background is a lot of the business scripts and business rules and client scripts and things like that are really managed at a task level, and a lot of people don't really manage it that way. So I'll just read mine real quick. A collection of like applications that have been developed by IT people for IT people. If used in a non-IT centric manner, a lot of configuration customization will be required to accomplish the goals of the organization, specifically in the government space. And especially, as I'll show you a little bit later on in the presentation, it takes a lot of effort to build out the related lists and tables that basically are applications in their own right. So it does take a lot longer to build out the PPM space for non-IT projects. So here I just want to kind of give you, here's all basically the sub applications that are included in PPS. And the ones I have highlighted in orange are ones that we'll go into a little deeper today. Demand management, I'm not going to read all these to you, but you can see demand, project, resource, and cost of what we're going to be going into today. Program and portfolio really can be, that is just a financial way of viewing your projects and demands. It does take a level of effort, though, to build the linkages between portfolio, program, and projects. Not every organization really structures their portfolios that way, or the way that their lines of business that way. So there may be some customization involved in there. Agile development, I know we already had a presentation on a few weeks ago, which was really, really good. I think basically any of these can have their own 30-minute kind of conversation of a deep dive of actually how it works. We won't be getting into the specifics of how they work, but I'm going to take you through kind of an overall strategy of how they work. So here is just a kind of a chart of how ServiceNow defines their process. And one thing I will say is, here we'll create an idea. That idea will be accepted and then turn into demand. One step here, and I have talked about it a little bit later in the slides, is not all demands become projects. So I want to make sure that you know that you can use the demand application and not have to use project, specifically if they're an enhancement, perhaps if you're using the whole SDLC and there's an enhancement that comes in via Agile. You can be a demand that maybe not be linked directly to a project if it's a little enhancement. But you can see then once a demand gets approved, it's going to go into a project. Typically, you would have templates. If you have a bunch of like projects that are going to use the same WBS structure or have similar tasks involved, you would create a template to use that. Here is also where you can request resources, and we'll get into that a little bit later. But up here with the incident enhancements, I don't necessarily agree with it being there. I don't think, I'm really struggling to figure out why a project would turn into an incident or enhancement and not a demand. So I don't necessarily agree with that being there, but I just wanted to highlight that ServiceNow believes that's kind of the way it goes. And from what I've seen, that is not how it goes. And then you can tell over here on the side, these are just basically styles of project management, right? The waterfall, waterfall, agile. You can have a hybrid or just a test environment, and you can apply any one of these styles to a project at any point. So here, what I'm going to do is basically what I'm going to do is take you through kind of ideation, demand, project, and some of the related lists that relate to projects. So I want to go through ideation here, kind of give you some screenshots, and then I'll actually go into the tool and show you how easy it is to submit an idea. Ideation, again, is part of the demand, application. So when you activate it, it will be there. It's basically the most, it is the easiest thing to get access to. I mean, you can get through the service catalog or self-service. So a user who has basically no rules whatsoever can still submit an idea. And that's basically what it is. It is thought to be used for by the ServiceNow people, right? They're thinking, hey, we got an organization here of IT people. Anyone's going to have a good idea. So we'll be able to manage those ideas, and some of them will turn into demands and projects. That being said, I've noticed a lot of clients, specifically in the government area, that this is a silo for them. They want this locked down. They only certain people can submit ideas. They don't trust any other people to see the ideas. They don't want other people to see them. So, one of these most basic functions in ServiceNow is now starting to be locked down. And, with that, you have to go into the self-service application and have to strip it out of there. You have to add ACLs to the idea table. And I mean, I'll show you in a minute, how simple submitting an idea in ServiceNow is, and what their out-of-the-box expectations are. And more and more, I'm seeing that a lot of our clients are adding a ton of new data fields to it, are adding process workflows, approval steps in this ideation process. When the reality is, this is literally just 2 lines, click a button, and you're good to go. Here, I'll show you kind of this. I'll show you this in a second in my PDI, but you can see, I mean, it's 2 lines. The only requirement is that I have a title for it. Anybody can do it, and it goes into the idea table, which is managed separately. Like I've said, that some customers want to start collecting some enterprise level data at this level, right? So they're looking for a demand manager maybe, or a location, or a business unit, or a strategy, or something that applies to their kind of process, right? So even though this is the out-of-the-box service catalog item, if you're doing ideation, you're probably going to end up having to adjust this catalog item. One of our clients that I'm working with now literally has 30 different data fields on just the idea form, and 22 of them are required. So you can see, how this really simple thing that ServiceNow has for out of the box can turn into a big problem. And so, my recommendation is that we try and keep this as simple as possible and have them collect that at a later point, but sometimes you're just not going to be able to do that. So you can see here, like if I were to go and click submit, which I will do here in a minute, it's going to take my idea, and you can see, hey, the idea has been created. Here is what the idea table looks like in different ideas or at different stages, right? So my idea was just submitted. I just had it. It's in the submitter stage, right? You can see that it's not linked to the demand yet because the demand has not been created, but you can see all these other stages too. And what I like about this table is that it gives you the entire life cycle of the idea, from the submit stage to the actual project close complete stage. So you can see from this table that ideas are linked the whole way to projects, right? So if you're looking to run reports of, hey, how many of my ideas have turned into a closed project, you can see that it's built in here, so you'll be able to actually use that. The way that I look at it from more of an analytical standpoint. When I go into a ServiceNow engagement, I'm looking at 2 things, right? I'm looking for, okay, what process, what workflow are they trying to change, And secondly, what data are they trying to aggregate? What are they looking for, right? What are these big dashboards or these big reports that they do every Monday at 9 o'clock? What are they trying to capture via the project module, right? And so then I can start to think about, okay, here's the tables that I need to use to start generate that data, and it allows me to kind of implement and design a little better. But if one of the metrics again is I want to see how many ideas become actual projects, you can see from this table right here, you have the data to be able to do that. So next here is the actual. So from the table, I've created an idea, and you can see here is the form, right? Here's the actual idea form. It's not very big. There isn't very many data points here. You can see though that I have filled out. Now these are not required fields. I would recommend that you maybe make them required because this starts to be able to map data at an enterprise level, right? These are hierarchical defined units at the enterprise level. Again, you got to think of it as these are IT people. They design it for IT things. So ideas typically link to configuration items at some point. Ideas typically are going to link to an ITSM, to an incident somewhere. If you can start to gather this data early on, you can start to generate better reports. But you can see, again, any idea can be submitted by any user. That user would have the ability to update or delete their idea, but they can't accept it. They will not have this button here. Only the project demand manager will be able to accept an idea. And this starts to get into the weeds of, hey, how many, the way that this is set up and the way the ACLs are set up is that any demand manager, any demand user, any demand manager or project manager will have the ability to come in here and accept ideas. The clients that I've worked with, that really doesn't sit well, right? They don't want just any basic user to be able to come in here and do that, right? So these forms tend to get more and more weighted down by ACLs, or screwing with up here with the UI actions, adding different steps to these ideas, only allowing it visible by certain people. So these forms become highly configurable. When you can see just out of the box, this is how small it really is, right? Now I'm going to just take you through I'm going to go to a catalog item and submit an idea so you guys can see kind of how it works, right? So again, any user come over here to self-service, to service catalog, self-service, right? Come over here. Typically it's in the can we help you area, and anybody can come in here and just submit an idea, right? Again, this is just a service catalog item record producer that's going to take me right to the idea table, right? You can see my new idea here. See that it's submitted. You can actually see my other project from before. I went through the steps of the demand, and it's up to project pending. But we can just click in here to the new idea, and you can see again, these are already automatically filled out departments and business units. Sometimes they're going to know that information, sometimes they're not. So it's up to you as to whether, when you're doing this design, whether you want to force them to create that. Some organizations may not be mature enough to understand this enterprise level data. Typically, a lot of people who come in with projects who want to stand up PPS, they aren't that defined yet at that level. So you may not be able to do this. It's recommended that you try to at the beginning, or at least get the conversation going, so you don't have to go back in and adjust records later on. But I am the demand manager here. I love this. This is going to make me some money. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to accept my idea. You can see now, you can see how quickly an idea can become a demand if they're saying out of the box, right? If they're not, again, you may have an approval workflow back there or something, or some other stages or states back there that have to be vetted before it gets to this point. You can see it left me on the idea form now, so my idea has been done. And we can go back to the table, and you can see now it's in a demand draft state. So that was just quickly, that's how you do an idea. Again, it's fairly easy, fairly straightforward for your developers out there. It tends not to be with clients, but if you're just doing out of the box and they are sticking to it, it can be done that simply. Again, here's kind of my take from what idea is. Again, keep it that simple, really. If you can keep it that simple and be able to have idea submitted by anybody and be able to have a group of users that are back there vetting those ideas, and they can approve them that quickly, it's very easy. And again, you'll be able to track an idea from its inception to the project close state, which I think is a pretty cool function, and gives you good reporting metrics to utilize. Again, though, people might want to really juice up their idea process, right? And you might have to build some workflows in there, especially for approval steps. This one here, understand the business rules, scripts, and script includes. So when you hit that submit form, and it becomes a demand, there is a script include that runs in the background that says, okay, take all the data that I entered here and move it to my demand. That's useful because the more and more data that is being collected, the more and more custom data that you're collecting out on that idea form, probably is going to need to be passed over to demand as well. So understanding what rules are passing that information back and forth is vital, especially when you start to kind of customize that idea form, because you don't want to have them enter data twice. Again, this one here that we talked about that earlier, but if you can make some type of enterprise level tracking mandatory, maybe department or business unit, but something else, if you can have an enterprise level field that's going to talk specifically to ITSM and some of the other main core tables, I would get that to be mandatory right away. That way you can start to link that data, right? You can start to be able to create linkages and create reporting metrics around that data. And again, all users can see submit idea from the service catalog right now. That's out of the box functionality. But a lot of clients that I've dealt with don't want that to happen. So you have to start to, and this one I always forget about this one, especially when they say, hey, I only want ideas to go to the specific group. In the self-service area, you have to start to manipulate what they can do in self-service as well. So that's one place to be wary if you are implementing IDEA. So next, and we saw in the PDI, the next is demand management. So IDEA gets accepted, it becomes a demand. And demand actually, has a lot more functionality behind it, obviously than IDEA does. There's a bit more of a process. There's definitely some more related lists that allow you to capture information for projects. And as I said it earlier, not all demands become projects. A demand could be considered an enhancement and would not become a project after that. So here you can see this is my old idea that had became a demand. That's the table. That's where it is, and anybody can access this table with an IT demand user. So all demand users and above, so that the IT project users inherit all demand capabilities as well, can see this table. Again, especially specifically in the government side, they don't like that. Demand managers are separate from project users. ServiceNow believes that, hey, if I'm a project person, I should be able to see all demands. Government doesn't tend to do that. So this area becomes, again, tricky, especially with inherited rules. So that's something to always think about if they're trying to kind of silo what demand is and who can see demand. There's a lot of inherited demand user rules throughout the system. So you have to be wary of that for people to be able to see the demand table. Here you can actually see the demand form, and you can see the amount of different data fields that are here. These ones are considered mandatory by ServiceNow. What kind of category is it a strategic or an operational, or what is it? Is it a project or an enhancement? Now changing this type here, that will actually kind of change the flow. This create project related list link will disappear, and we'll start to ask you to start to map some stories over here. But you can see, you can actually capture a lot of information at demand level. Portfolio and program, which are, as much as you can get out of here, the better you are when it comes to managing the project and the related analytics on there. You can see down here, all these related lists too. If you capture anything here, these will roll over to the project once you've completed it. So if you've created any cost plans or you requested any resources. However, resources, there is demand resources versus project resources. So the resource plan would be completed for the demand as opposed to the project. But there is a way to roll over those resources to a project depending on how your date fields are going to work. So one thing too about demand, I'm going to show you here too. You can see there is demand workbench, and this is where a lot of demand managers are going to live, right? I ran a filter on this list just to show you the one that I have. If I were to take this filter off, you would see probably 60 to 70 demands here. Every demand would be here. And this demand workbench basically is computed by risk score. You can see, the y-axis is here are risk. I have the capability to take this dot and move it anywhere on the board that I see fit, depending upon how I've determined what my risk is going to be. This will change the risk calculation in the demand if I can drag and drop it anywhere I want to. If I'm saying that the value is going to be high and the risk is going to be low, and I put it over here, that will go into the background and go in here to the assessment data, and it will change my risk score, which is pretty cool. That's kind of the only thing you can do in the demand workbench, though, is drag and drop. It's not like the PPS console where you can actually drag tasks around or anything like that. So when you see the demand workbench, that is what this is actually used for. So this is the idea that I promoted and has now become a demand. And as you can see, again, here's the category here. They give you 2 out of the box, strategic or operational. This typically changes. A lot of people don't necessarily agree with that category of demand, so they'll add some new things. But again, what I want to caution you on is that typically anytime you see a mandatory field somewhere, it is going to be included in some type of activity, whether it's a script, business rule, UI action. So when you add choices to this list or outright change it, just be aware that something somewhere else probably is not going to work as expected. So when you make these mandatory, again, make sure that if you're going to change them, that you're cognizant of other places that it may be used. You see it's going to be in a project and enhancement, like I said, then all demands are going to become projects. But here, you would, again, I would recommend trying to get this data as, close to the beginning as possible, because again, the more that you leave these blank, the less and less impact reports and dashboards will have on the clients. Typically, and if they're managing at a portfolio or program level, it would be good data to have to see how many demands are associated with portfolios, specifically for planning purposes. But you can also see here, again, you can have a business case. All these fields are available in the project form, but you can fill them out here, and they will certainly transfer over. And again, if, and this is what I said with the idea as well, there's going to be some type of script include that's going to take all of this data and move it over to the project table once I say create project. So if you add any new fields here, or you're changing some things, make sure that you just go in and double check that script include. Make sure you're capturing all the data that you want to over in the project form. But you can also see that now, this is in a draft state. So a demand user, demand manager, or IT project user or manager come in here and evaluate these demands. Typically for the evaluation, you're going to have either required fields, typically, business case. I've seen this a lot where, you have to make the business case for why this demand is going to be good. So again, those are probably mandatory fields that you're going to have. And then it will go through the process of, I'm going to submit it. And then typically here's where you start to have your demand, approval groups. I don't necessarily see everybody going through every one of these steps, screening, qualified, and approved. Typically, I'd see them get rid of this qualified state, the person that's screening it, if they will approve it. But again, you have to check with their process to see how they want to do it, right? And you may end up building a workflow in the background that says, hey, I need to have a group of people approve this, or you can manipulate it by UI actions up here that says, when this group logs on, they only see this one at this particular stage. What I do see though is that, and you can see that state and phase are not here anywhere, and that's because ServiceNow does not want you to touch those during this, because again, there's a specific process that this is following. But I see a lot of clients that go up and either don't like this or want to change it. So there are a lot of UI actions and a lot of background things that happen with phase and state being identified. So if you're going to change them, again, just make sure that you're changing it everywhere. So I'm going to say that, hey, I'm on the approval team, so I'm going to screen it. Again, if I can tick qualify here, right, and it will qualify, and it will show you that I skipped this step. It depends on their process. Again, I've seen it anywhere from they do the whole thing to they don't, and they only go from submitted to approved. But again, it depends on what they want to do. But we're going to go ahead and approve it. Now, if you notice, even though the demand is approved, it hasn't said that I've created a project yet. And ServiceNow specifically did that again because I still have the capability to change this, that it can be an enhancement and not a project. Maybe it got to the certain point where it was qualified and somebody said, hey, I don't want this to be a project, I want it to be an enhancement. So they specifically leave that out. I've seen a lot of customers once you click approve to kick off this create project. You can see it as a related list down here. We can either use that as a UI button up there, or during the acceptance criteria or the accept button, we can have it reference this. But I'm going to go ahead and create this project from my demand. And you can see now there has been a project created for this. Okay, so demand real quick. I'll try to speed this up a little bit. Again, it is typically the most customized piece of the process that I have seen. Again, specifically with the process flow and it being siloed, that there's usually more than one demand approval group when it goes to the different stages. So just be ready for that with the demand function. Again, they have two roles for it: a demand user and demand manager. But anything in the IT project manager and above inherits those rules. So specifically when people are trying to kind of siphon that demand off, there are a lot of other roles that inherit those roles. So just be wary of that. Again, UI action buttons will probably be the highest customized thing in there. They want to be able to press the button and it do the following actions, whether it's approve and create a project or only be visible at a certain stage of the demand. So just be wary of that too when you're trying to design your demand form. And also down here, a lot of project and platform data can be captured here in demand. Any one of those related lists will move over to the project, so you already have a baseline. Again, and if you can identify the program or portfolio early on as to what that demand is, that would be for the best. So the next step from demand, you go straight into project management. Again, the quick and dirty, it's a suite of tools that manages projects, tasks, and resources. One thing I want to highlight though is the Workbench. That's, if I'm designing this for an end user, that's where I want them to live. I don't know how often it happens to you guys, but specifically in the government area, we're kind of designing as we go. As the client gets more comfortable in the tool, they start to see more things. Specifically for project, I like to just have them saying, just go to the planning console, go to the console, go to the Workbench, manage it from there. That way they're not kind of in the background on the forums, doing a lot of data manipulation or field manipulation. And it gives them more of a Visio feel. They can drag and drop and create dependencies via the Workbench. And it gives them more of a user interactive type of feel than just living in the forums all day. Another recommendation is project templates. If you can get the client early on to agree to some templates, it's kind of like tasks for like functionality. It makes it a lot easier than them trying to import big Microsoft project files. ServiceNow is notoriously poor at integrating Microsoft Project with their project tool. It's very limited in the import. You can only import, and I believe it's like up to 12 fields from Microsoft Project. And I think Orlando's at maybe 20 now. But you look at some of these big clients, and their Microsoft Project is built out to include like 50 or 60 rows, and they're tracking everything from time of day to sun angle to all this crazy stuff about projects that don't make their way into ServiceNow. And a lot of clients are very surprised by that, especially early on. And then they're kind of told that, hey, well, you can do an import and export into Microsoft Project, and we can do an integration, when reality is that ServiceNow is very, their project schedules, they only export one type of schedule, and it has to be imported that exact same way. So it does become kind of a mess. That's why I prefer the actual process of going from idea to demand a project. But when it's sold, people are thinking that they're going to be importing their MS project schedules in here, and that becomes very time consuming. So just be wary of that. If you hear that they want to integrate with Microsoft Project, that's going to be a hurdle in itself. So here again, this is just quick. This is the project table. You can see kind of, just the data that they're collecting overall. This is what ServiceNow thinks is a good kind of overview of what you should be tracking. You'll probably end up customizing this for your client at some points, but real quick and easy on that. This is the actual project form, and what I wanted to highlight here is a few things. First, the state field, right? So the state field is a field that's generated from the task table. I have ran into it time and time again where people come in and add different states or want to include different states, and it ends up being mapped very, very weirdly, and it's affecting other tables. So, I want to highlight that this specifically in the project form, when you start going in and changing states from their out of the box states, make sure that, even if you say, hey, I'm going to do it for the project form, that bleeds down to other forms too. So because, with extended tables and related lists and things like that. So this part becomes does become tricky, especially when you're using states in other parts of the platform, which it's used every single place. So when a client comes and says they want to start changing these states, I hesitate with that and try to push them towards just using the ServiceNow out of the box states, or possibly creating a new field to capture what states they were. Again, this state field affects more than just the where your project is in a current state, right? There's UI actions and rules that key off state, and make it a very, very important field in the project form. So I just wanted to highlight that part. And also you can see the amount of related lists that have come down here now. These are things that I like to, it does become a little cumbersome to see all these down here, because these related lists are, and we'll go into resource plans here in a second, but these related lists are kind of applications on their own, right? They need to be developed out as well as the project form. So I run into it time and time again where you give somebody the IT project manager role, and they come in here and then they start monkeying around with all these things down here without a true understanding of what table is this, where does it go, what's it referencing, how does it interact across the platform and enterprise level outside of PPM, and what can I best use it for? These are just as important, if not more important, than this actual form up here. So I like to, when I do it, I like to go through all these at the beginning and say, hey, what are you capable of implementing right now, right? Obviously, project task, what would be there? Maybe some requirements, maybe some risks or decisions or issues. But if they're not 100% ready to delve into those and define what the outcomes are, I just go in and I hide those lists. I just take them out from the picker until they're ready. Because again, you see all these and you feel like you need to be using them, and the problem is that it becomes like the Wild West, and you really don't get a lot of consistency here without identifying them and actually implementing them across the platform. So every project manager, every person that has the ability to access the risk table or the requirements table is capturing the same information. So this part down here to me is just as important as developing this part out up here. Next, I just want to take you, now this is what I was talking about, the planning console, and this is where I would recommend that you push all of your end users to use, and we'll go into it here in a minute in the PDI, but you can see, you have the ability to run some analytics in here. Details just kind of gives you the project form as a whole. This is the planning part. This is the scheduling part where you have the ability to drag and drop and create dependencies, add new tasks in here if you'd like to. It really gives the project manager, the interactiveness that they want to see in real time with Gantt charts. So this is kind of like where this is where I point them to use this a lot. And if you're developing or you're talking with any of your customers about that, I definitely direct them to be here. Again, you have the ability to see requested resources or approved resources, any type of financial data that you're looking to see here, and creation. You can create a status report and have it right here on your board. Again, my idea has now become a project, and you can see again, here's the state, right? And be hesitant about changing any of these. Maybe make some of these inactive if they don't want to do closed, incomplete, or skipped. But again, when you start adding things in here, I've noticed actually there's I don't know how many people have seen this, but when you start doing custom states, there was a bug in ServiceNow, which I don't know if it's fixed in Orlando or not, but the bug said it could not map custom state. We just ran into this in one of our other projects because it was a field that was not mapped to an existing state. Again, it's just not a recommended field to really screw with on the project form. Also, what I tend to find too is there are too many date fields down here. You can see there are like 6 separate areas for them to collect dates. And typically, I end up, and you can see these are read only. They're created basically at the project. The project was created for a day. When you create a project, it just scheduled it for one day, right? So you'd have to come in and adjust the time frame on it. Or if you had a template and it had project tasks down here, those dates would roll up to here. You can see the original start and original end date. Typically, projects don't start the minute that you create it from a demand. The project manager, wants to be able to adjust the days on that. So typically, these fields are hidden. I don't see a lot. I often recommend that you don't have them unless you need it for some kind of audit reporting. Again, I recommend that people only keep data fields on here that they're going to use to drive reporting, especially to the end users. You don't want to see a lot of blank fields that you may use at some point but don't use now. Again, it's really easy just to hide them in the slush bucket and bring them back at a later date. But you can see all this data, the plan start and end date, business case, everything got mapped over from the demand. So the more work you do up front in the demand section, again, the better off you'll be for the project. This here, the financials. Again, ServiceNow is expecting the IT project manager typically to manage all of this stuff, when the reality is, especially in the government space, there's a separate set of people who do this. So typically this related, or this form piece gets hidden and is only available for specific people. Again, these fields here, you can see they're read only. They are going to roll up from your cost plans, from your benefit plans, resource plans, any expenses. You can see that they're read only. They're going to roll up from this. There's a script included that's going to run, that's going to say, hey, I need you to sum all these and bring it over here. So when people ask kind of where these come from, they come from the related list down here. Obviously project manager has the ability to do some things here, but it takes out kind of the ability for the project manager to manipulate everything without having records of it down here. So again, my take on this, again, there is a limitation with the import-export functionality with ServiceNow and Microsoft Project. So when you hear those words, I know out on the community, there's definitely a list of what fields ServiceNow will integrate with. So make sure you bring that up and understand what fields you want to bring over. Again, enterprise level information at the beginning. The quicker they start thinking about that, the more valuable the information in their project form will be. Again, adjusting the date fields, especially for plan start and planned end, that typically cascades into other tasks. We have clients that want to change the names of them and change the schedule. And that really, changing that in the plan start and end dates really has repercussions in all of your tasks. So if you do that, make sure that you go into each task or each record that's related to it and ensure that that plan start date's not keying anything in those areas. Again, define the project schedule early. There's different types of schedules that you can create, and ServiceNow has some out-of-the-box ones. Typically use, weekdays from 8 to 5, excluding holidays. That's typically the project schedule that they use, but ServiceNow won't export that schedule. They'll only export, I believe it's the MS project schedule. So if you have a project that you're trying to export, it's going to adhere to that schedule, and that may not be the schedule that they're using in MS project. So then you run into a problem. And then when you try to re-import that schedule in, it has a new schedule than the one that you earlier used. So there's just some complications with the import and export, and I would highly suggest against it if you can. Again, I said there's understand the dashboard requirement, understand what they're trying to actually get out of it, right? Are they trying to understand you know, how many tasks get completed in one day? How many portfolios have demands that have become projects? Things like that, because if you're going to start to identify that, then you know where you need to actually start collecting that data from, and give them better reporting capabilities. Again, steer customers to live and work in the planning console, not the backend form. It's a little more user-friendly, and you won't get sucked into the black hole of, I want this field to say this and not this. And again, project is kind of the jumping off point for linking, you know, the entire ITBM suite. Everything kind of maps back to projects. It's kind of the fulcrum that allows you to go out to the other parts of the console. So resource management. You know, this is a big piece of it. A lot of people want to do resources, but you know, understand that resource management is a separate standalone piece to the PPS suite, right? It's integrated with project and portfolio management, but it's its own piece and therefore requires its own management. You know, resource managers should be separate than the project managers. Project managers should request resources, and the resource manager should be able to allocate those resources. You know, a lot of project managers want to be able to do that themselves, and that's what, you know, that's not kind of what ServiceNow has envisioned by creating this. You can see here that this would be a resource request, right? So I'm a project manager. I need to, here's my project, and here's my name and my resource. I'm requesting it for this project. You know, identify the groups early, determine whether you want to put the request out to any member of that team or a specific member. You can choose from the drop down. If they have identified any skills as the resource, and you know, whether you're requesting actually an FTE or an hour. But you know, the resource request, again, you can be very specific as to what you want, or you can allow the resource manager to say, hey, here's who I have available, and I'm going to allocate them to you based upon, you know, this. Now here you can see, so I've taken my resource plan. The requested allocations came over here. There were 2 group members in that group of the technical support that met the criteria. So I requested those resources, and then as the resource manager, I've gone through and I have allocated those resources. So it's come through, and you can see who it's scheduled for and how many hours that they are scheduled for. And once because I've linked that project to this particular resource, you can see now this is the project form. I have a resource plan that's been created for me, how much it's going to cost me, and there's also a cost plan that's been created. So you can see now some of the financials are being created here via the resource plan. What I want to say is that, you know, resource plan, again, you can see that these are not, you know, project type data fields. These are more financial, right? So you're going to have a different skill set of people who are going to be managing this versus project form, right? So, you know, that's why it's a really good idea to have a resource manager or have somebody identified as a resource manager to be able to do this. Again, it's just different data fields. There's different data that hides behind here, and how it's calculated. You can start to see that I'm starting to get into the financial section, which may not play into the hands of an IT project manager, especially because of the way the project manager field is being defined by different clients. So here I'll quickly take you through a resource plan. So here you can see real quick, and I'll just, you know, you can see what is required. Obviously, groups, I got to be able to assign this to somebody, right? I can do all members, specific member, any member. I'll just choose any. How many hours you want to do, or if it's FTE, you can see it will change to FTE. We'll just do hours. Say I need 200 hours. Now here you can see you can either assign it to an individual task or an actual project. So here's the project that I had that I need to have resources for. And you got to define a time period, obviously. I'm going to ask for today until 2 weeks. You can determine whether you want to do this, you want to allocate it on a weekly basis or a monthly basis or for the entire plan. So if I know, if it's a firm fixed price contract and I know it's going to be 40 hours a week, I can just do the plan duration. But we're going to do it with monthly right now, and allocation spread. You can front load it or you can be an even. So we're just going to do even across. So here is the ability to either request it. Again, if I'm a project manager, I won't be able to submit. I'll only be able to request it. But as the sysadmin, I'll be able to do that. And you can see here, see here as a resource manager, I could say, okay, they've requested, this amount of work from this group. This group has obviously a bill rate, so it's figuring that out for me. So what I can do is actually go in and take a look at it again, make sure it's all right. I'm going to confirm and allocate that that's okay. And now you can see all 3 people in that group got allocated to this, and they are now booked. Now, if you were using a time card system, you would be able to interface with a time card system here. But that's another that's another lesson for another time if you're going to do like no kidding time card allocation in here. So we can go back to the project. You can see now my total plan cost has increased. You can see that I actually have now investments down here and cost plans that have been created for this particular resource. So I'm already starting to populate these pieces over here. So real quick, again, resource plan it's not part of the PPM area. Again, so you need to have a specific role to get into the resource plans, resource user or resource manager. So not all project managers are resource managers, obviously. So just understand that when you submit a resource plan, you need to have you need to have somebody with the resource user role or anything to manage that. Again, it's best when the resource manager is the one prioritizing and allocating resources, so you don't have people getting overbooked. Time card tie-in, again, best to do on the separate or third phase of the implementation. I have yet to meet a client that uses time cards very, very well inside of ServiceNow. So if that's a requirement as part of the resources, that really has to be vetted and thought out pretty well. And again, this resource data is best viewed on a dashboard. I would recommend just sending somebody to a dashboard to see, almost like we do, with our time cards, right? You can see how many hours you've been allocated for, how many you billed so far during that week. It's better to see it there than in the actual project. And then real quick, the cost management section. I wanted to highlight this part here in black because you can see that cost management tracks configuration item costs. That's what it's built for. In PPM, they're not really using it for that. They are using it, again, more to manage and track costs across projects. But here you still have the ability to try to map it to cost centers or business services or applications, which once a CMDB is set up, if one is not set up, it will allow you more easily to link those projects to CIs. Again, we have talked about this quite a bit, but this is the financial section of the actual project form. Again, these fields are generated mostly from related lists below, the cost plan related lists. Again, if they're trying to, again, there's scripts and things that run in the background that calculate these. So if people are trying to change what this is, there is going to be repercussions on how it actually does calculations. So just be wary of that if a client wants to do that. Again, I kind of start here. These are going to be your cost related type of related lists. Again, they are cost types of lists. They are not project types of lists. So there's going to be different data and different expectations that need to come from designing these. And what I wanted to highlight was actually the project budget. Out of the box, this new button doesn't exist there. It's omitted because they want your budget to come from actual a planning, somebody else planning budgets and saying, hey, I'm going to plan this amount of money for this particular project, and it will sit down here. They don't want project managers to really start to create budgets after their project is stood up. They think of it that you should be creating a budget before the project stands up. I just want to bring that up because most customers don't operate that way. So you will have to just go in and add this button to this particular related list. Again, this is the so this is project budget here. You can see it's pretty sparse. You can create a project or a budget for a demand or a project. But again, all this data here rolls up to the financials section. And one thing that I do want to discuss is once you do start to use the financial and costing information, you're going to have to find a fiscal calendar. So the system knows how to start doing calculations. It's pretty easy to do. There's a fiscal period. You just go in and generate the calendar. But you can see it's mandatory. So if you haven't generated your calendar yet, you won't be able to use the budgeting application. And here, this is also too, if your project manager wants to do expense lines, expense came in for my project, I got to track it. You can see here that, again, this does not look anything like the project form. So again, this is new functionality that you need to teach your PM that to manage their actual project if that's what they want to do. You can see it's a different form. It goes out to different places in the system. It just doesn't stay with that particular project. There's the expense line table that's going to house every one of your expense lines. There's cost models that use expense lines. So, understanding that it branches out further from this is key. One thing I want to point out though, if you are doing expense lines, the source ID, even though it's not mandatory out of the box, unless you have mapped this to a particular source, it's not going to know where to put that expense line. You can see that it has it at the task, but it doesn't have the source ID needs to be filled out, or it won't map it. I don't know why that is, but I've run into that a few times where I had a client trying to map expenses, and they had their tasks there in their cost center. However, they didn't have their source ID, and it wasn't showing up in the related list. So I won't walk you through this because I know we're at the top of the hour here. But again, for cost management, the cost core data is definitely different than project core data. You have to have a basic knowledge of your finances, which typically causes you to interact with the financial department. Finance people are notoriously hard to deal with, especially in enterprise level data. So be prepared to spend some time doing that. Again, yeah, the financial stakeholders use external, you're going to have to get up a cadence with not only your stakeholder, but an external stakeholder in the finance areas to see how they identify and quantify costs, especially cost type. That's typically a pretty big deal. And many organizations now, especially with cost data, are trying to track it in an ITBM, TBM manner with predefined categories, cost centers, and language. That's probably a good way if they don't know which way they want to go. That would be a good way to recommend they go forward. And I will be getting into ITBM and TBM specifically in the next Share the Wealth. So that's kind of it.